Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us right here on Morning at NTV. Did you know that over 58 million people passed away or were killed this year alone, 2021? Of course, COVID-19 has brought about bad news, but then other people have been dying as a result of other illnesses. Communicable diseases have killed almost 12 million people. We've lost over almost 7.5 million children under the age of 5. Cancer has killed almost 8 million people. Smoking of cigarettes has killed almost, 4.9 million people. Alcohol, too much drinking of alcohol has killed almost 2.4 million people. Now, those who decided, it's too much, I'm under too much pressure and decided to kill themselves are over 1 million people. Yes, those are the ones who decided, it's too much and I can't handle the situation anymore. So as we talk about the full reopening of the economy, we do know that there are some parents out there who might not be having the financial muscle to actually ascertain that their learners get back into the school system. What is government doing about that? We also do know that there are some private institutions that have been grappling with so many loans and might not be able to reopen in January of 2022. What has government done about that? Well, the Minister of Education, that is Janet Kataha Museveni, came out recently and she said, No. We shan't be according any financial help to the private institutions, even though we know they've been financially distressed under the last 2 years of this COVID-19 pandemic. So what are some of the ramifications that might be birthed out of that negligence from the government when they decided to neglect the private institutions, which account for almost 85% of all the education institutions right here in Uganda? I do have Hasadu Chidabira, the chairperson of the National Private Education Institutions right here in Uganda. A very good morning, Hasadu Chidabira.
Good morning, how are you?
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for hosting me.
And indeed, a pertinent conversation we ought to be having this beautiful Thursday morning. We are reopening in January of 2022, but government is saying they won't be according you any kind of financial help. Maybe if we did paint for them a picture of how private institutions have been grappling during the last 2 years, maybe they'll be compelled to come out stronger to offer some kind of stimulus packages for you and other private players within the education system. How has COVID-19 affected your operations during the last 2 years?
Thank you very much. Of course, when we talk about private education institutions in Uganda, we account for over 18,000 institutions that are registered. 70% secondary schools private, 40% private institutions, primary, and 100% nursery. So that is the picture. Now, in the midst of all that, we know that these schools have been grappling with the challenge of the pandemic, which was not their making. I want to assert that in the course of this, many schools have lost their properties to the banks, auctioneers, moneylenders. And of course, as you know, the properties of the schools at stake, many of those that have not been taken have been spoiled by the situation. Bills, the fixed costs in the schools have been on the rise. Electricity, water, the local taxes and the central government taxes have been key. Even as of now. When we talk about students, we know many don't want to go back to schools. Many have lied idle. Those who are not idle have involved in dubious engagements. Others, have changed the characters and behaviors. Others no longer have interest of going back to the schools. Others have forgotten totally what they learned and they are no longer interested. Others are working, which is dangerous. When you come to the parents, men are working, just like you know. Many wake up early in the morning, go to work. They have lost their responsibilities. No one cares of who is left behind at home. The disciplines, the region, the what that are meant to be imparted by the parents, they are all lost and they are melting away. Of course, when you shed the picture, it gives you the situation now. One of the three, according to the UNEB report, students or learners you see, at least one has got married. And this marriage means involvement into sexual, immoral acts. And this has pregnancy, which is on the rise. And generations have been lost. 4,000 learners are produced a day here in Uganda. Now, if you multiply that by 1 month and by 1 year, what big generation do we have now that have not gone to school? And if they are not going for the second 1 year, all these other 2 years plus one, what will it mean to Uganda? When we talk about the sector, of course, people say, why education? Why education? First, I have told you what we enroll. Two, we know we have a multiplier effect. We have a multiplier contribution. We have a chain of support from, we support from very many sectors, the textile, the stationery, the suppliers of items, a lot of things. All these entirely depend on the private sector when they are opened, and if they are closed, all those businesses are shuttered. Now, vis-a-vis that, we are doing what an obligation which we call is of a public character. So it is not for us, it is for the government and for the community, the people of Uganda. Therefore, when this COVID sets in, we are not prepared. Of course, no one was prepared. But being something of health, we expected a joint effort of us and the government to see how they would come in to rescue these learners from being affected and save the health and safety of the learners in the institutions, no matter private or government. Because today it is private, a child crosses to government. Now, how will it be if this child was not treated well to survive? He crosses and then spreads the disease to the other children you are protecting. So all of this brings a kind of situation which we say is calamitous to the education sector.
Well, of course, the National Planning Authority is telling us that over 30% of our learners will not get back into the school system on account of teenage pregnancies, child marriages, and also child labor. But that aside, they're also telling us that over 3,000 of our primary schools won't be reopening, and over 800 of our secondary schools won't be reopening. According to your statistics as the chairperson of the private education institutions, how many of the 18,000 institutions have been affected by COVID-19 and might not be reopening in January?
Many schools
are we talking about more than 3,000?
Of course, we are talking about over 5,000 education institutions that might not open.
I see.
In Kampala alone,
out of 18.
Yes, out of 18. In Kampala alone, others are still, grappling, to see how they can start change the user now from the rentals now back to this.
Indeed.
Kampala alone, we are registering over 98 education institutions in all of the 5 divisions. That one we have concluded it. So we are only waiting to see whether some might resume by changing the current use, because they already changed the use to rent or to any other business. But 98 so far, we have registered them. Those ones are out of system. So that is the extent of the problem.
And of course, government is telling us you won't be receiving any kind of stimulus package. But of course, you've undergone a lot of financial distress. How is this affecting all the private players? And don't you think if we do not help private players, we might end up with a situation whereby not all education institutions reopen and so forth? Why did government, stop in its work to give you financial help? What was their reasoning?
I think the government seems, what we are learning, the government seems not to be interested in education, especially in the private sector.
I see.
In spite
You're the
of
competition.
But the competition...
It seems like they're looking at you as the competition, and not helping you means like they are doing away with the competition.
Actually, not even a competition, but a political competition.
I see.
It's as if we are a political party competing with public. We are telling them, please, look, we are not a political party. We are not competing. The competition you have is health, and it is improving quality of education. You can't talk of SDG 4 without private sector, because we lead the way.
Indeed.
Now, how do you rescue the private sector so that we regain our glory and we go back to where we should be as education in Uganda?
Indeed.
Because other players in the region, they are continuing. We cannot claim the space in the region. These others are producing laborers coming out into the space. Uganda is nowhere. This and all the programs the government is undertaking creates a dichotomy between education, and in education you have no discrimination. This is private because we are targeting the same. When we go to university, we are moving into the same. When we produce labor, they are coming into the same market. Therefore, we thought that government would come in and help, which we have not seen. We lobbied the government. We have been to State House, I don't know how many times. We have been to Parliament. Recently, we were there to lobby for at least a support of 100 million per school, depending on the needs assessment, to see how schools can, this is a short-term intervention, short-term, to be able to cater for the safety of learners, infrastructure, and to pay some salaries, arrears of the teachers, and to see how we start off, clean off, get soaps, sanitizers, get the hand washing facilities, and all of that, to paint, facelift the schools to the level that can fit the learners. We have not seen this. And banks have been taking on the properties of the schools. Now, what have we done? And the government, they have kept on, I can call it lamenting. That's why we moved it to Parliament. That is after we had come to conclusions with the Minister of Education, and there was nothing materializing.
I see.
And when you look at all this, we have a challenge with the Ministry of Education, Health and Planning. Those three are key in our sector. Now, the ministry, the one who has to stamp on programs to kick off, sometimes they are delayed, which I think they are political. Someone releases a calendar, 3 weeks to reopening. What kind of preparation do you expect? People ask for some kind of relief. And this relief, the money we are asking for in private education institutions, is not free. We are talking about money which is going to be paid back. But to jumpstart the sector, how do we go out of where we are? What kind of policies does government have? Interventions, deliberate financial interventions that are geared towards now bringing back the sector on the scene, which are not seen. Even up to now, there is no outlet.
With how government is behaving, Mr. Hazadu Chirabira, we might end up with 0 teachers from the private institutions. Remember, during the last 2 years, those teachers within the public institutions were getting some kind of a pay from the government. But then those in the private institutions, since you are being paid based on the school fees coming in from the parents, many of whom did not get any kind of money. So they left the profession. Yes, there is Nachitio here around Mulago. She was a former teacher. Now she's frying her chapatis, her cassava. And when we did reach out to her, talking to her about getting back into the skill system in January, she said, I'm making more money right now than I was making as a teacher. Aren't you concerned that as we reopen, many of the private teachers might not actually get back into the school system owing to that fact that they did not get any kind of help?
And that is the fact. We have already opened to see how we can reorganize. We are all calling to see who is there and who is not there. When you check, for example, in my schools, City Junior and Kiara High School, I have a population of teachers of over 87 teachers.
I see.
So far I have registered 32. The rest are not there. And the fact is, many of them were moved outside and etc. But this campaign we are in as education, private, NAPEA, we are trying to see how we mobilize learners back, how we mobilize, we call this back to school campaign for learners, students, and the teachers. For sure, when you try to reflect psychologically, it tortures the situation within which the teachers are. Of course, you will understand that it is very, very, very absurd. But we are all saying, the cream. When we that point is key. When we talk of teachers, we shall get new teachers, but that's not the cream we want. We build on the old teachers who have experience, and you can't talk of quality education without experienced teacher, because one of the pillars of quality is the quality of the teacher. Now, today, many of them have moved, not only for other jobs, but also for teaching in the region, in the countries in the region that are opened. Not only that, but even the students have moved to those countries. They used to come here, but now they are leaving, going there. The teachers used to come here, but now they are leaving. And in the region, our teachers have been at least of some level.
Indeed, they have.
And now today, when you see, they have all been...
We have the best education within the East African.
Best.
Indeed.
Now, if they are not there, and it cuts across. It cuts across. You go to tertiary, you go to secondary, primary, all levels. So they are all flying away. And now we are looking at a melting of the education sector. And our concern, private schools, when you talk of private, we are talking about quality. when you bring your child to a private school, the purpose and intention is to see that this child performs well and excels to the level you expect.
Well, of course, if you're just joining us on this conversation, we're talking about the school closures and the reopening of the same in January. Our schools, according to UNICEF, have been closed for over 83 weeks. That is the longest school closures in the world, ahead of that is Bolivia and also Nepal. Uganda has closed schools more than any other country all over the world. So we're talking about the psychological distress that has befallen the learners, the parents, and also the teachers alike as we reopen the education institutions. We are reopening. That is on January 10th. Private institutions have not been given any money. How are you going to put in place all these equipment, all these measures that you need to adhere to the standard operating procedures? Like, you know, increasing the spaces within the classrooms to accommodate the spacing of 2 to 3 meters. Is that going to be highly possible given the limited time you are accorded before the reopening?
Thank you. The situation as far as reopening is concerned is very hypothetical, if I have to say.
As far as fighting COVID is concerned, is this time enough for you to implement everything that they need for you to put in place?
I think the time is not enough vis-a-vis the resources. And this is clearly a making of government, Minister of Education. I said you cannot release a calendar through weeks. And to us as private schools, if you are not supporting us, a calendar pronounces or announces the reopening, because it tells us when and how, you know. There are a lot of things that fall up the calendar. Now, I have to start squeezing myself financially and see how I'm going to facilitate my school in terms of all what you have said in this limited space. Now, we are saying we are opening not for the sake of opening and preparation, but for the sake of the trend you have talked about in the situation analysis of what is happening. When you look at what is happening, you force yourself into opening. But in actual sense, if it was at liberty, you wouldn't say the time is ample for me to open. But all in all, private schools were not meant to be supported by government. It is only the crisis that bringing us into that kind of. However, we are partners with the government, but partners who never benefit from government, but in a painful venture. Therefore, we are just calling upon our friends, the proprietors, to improvise. I think the saying of the Minister of Finance of sell what you have, time has come that we realize it. We are complaining, but actually it is coming on board. At this time, no one is rescuing you. Either you lose the school, the property you have made for a long time, all you start. Starting means, please, sell the little you have outside and get resources. Get some capital if you can. We have talked with some banks, like Sentinel and Bank of Africa. They are willing to give new loans, simple loans, as capital to help the schools start off once again. Government, through the office of the Prime Minister recently, last week, but one were here, they have 200 billion. This one is meant for small-scale businesses, of which we are invited to participate and see how our members can benefit.
You're also taking part in the 200 billion stimulus package?
It is, we are struggling.
SMEs? Schools are also involved?
They invited us to struggle for it, actually. We are struggling.
Then what happened?
Of course, we have not tried because we have just been called in, and we are yet trying to check in through the procedures and see whether there is light at the end of it all.
And John Walugembe, the president for the Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, shall be making his way to the studio. Maybe we shall give us some kind of information on that particular factor, the private institutions being added onto the 200 billion shilling stimulus package in that regard. The parents are concerned, Ms. Chidavira. The parents are concerned because they are hearing reports coming in from the National Planning Authority. The authority is saying we are recording over 500 cases of COVID-19 on a daily basis. So as we are noticing an exponential increase in COVID-19 cases, what are the private players doing to ensure that you put yourself in a greater position or state to ward off the spread of COVID-19 when the students or learners embrace the school system when they come back?
I think we are taking
measures.
We are taking serious steps. I want to thank the Minister of Education for the initiatives, however they are late, but we have tried to fix sustainable measures that can help us get rid of the challenges in the schools. However, some, as I said, the challenge we have is late implementation of strategies. One of them is to have a clear surveillance mechanism which didn't exist before. The mechanism is clear. Two, it is having preparation of the managers of the schools, which has taken place in the last 2 weeks. However, they were not facilitated, and we can't claim that all participated because of the constraints of the resources and government didn't support. But at least the trainers of the trainees have been inducted, and they're now going back to the schools to train the teachers on case management, situation management, and also they are going back to sensitize the parents on how they should handle the learners in the schools, those who are reporting and all of that. 2, 3, besides that, clear mechanisms of managing SOPs in the schools to avoid mistakes have been also put in place. Links between Ministry of Health, Education, and nearby health centers has also been created. Those are clear mechanisms which are deliberate. And now in the surveillance mechanism, we are looking up to the roles of the head teacher. We are looking at to the roles of how they are implemented, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health, and the district task forces, whose kind of responsibility have been renewed. All of these, their responsibilities have been renewed because we saw some gaps in the previous reopening that were not bridged by this. So I want to give confidence to the public that at least there are measures sustainable. In spite of the increase or the reopening does not mean that COVID is not there. But how do we get rid of it? How have others done it in the Middle East? We have overdelayed because others have moved with it, and every day we see new emergencies. Now we are sure that this can happen. COVID is there. Let us go for vaccination, put up the mask, follow the measures they have instituted. We are yet to have induction of the school health workers to upskill them on how they are going to manage. But what we are only calling upon government is to see how they can subsidize the testing kits for the schools, because wherever you find a case, of course, it requires you to test almost the whole school in order to be safe. How are we going to go about this? There is some silence on that, but if the government can improvise, subsidize, and make the testing kits available, we test and treat in the case of the challenge.
We are also hearing that some teachers who might not be unvaccinated will not be allowed on the premises.
Yes.
Is that also going to be the same on the private institutions?
It is the same.
Learners not being allowed if they're not vaccinated, teachers not being allowed if they're not vaccinated, support staff not being allowed. We want to know more about that, and also the issue of school fees. Private players have a tendency to increase school dues whenever there is a school term taking center stage. We want to know more about that. And what efforts are you doing to expand the school premises to accommodate the social distancing directive? Go ahead.
Yes, to start with that, I think there is a provision of creating temporary structures, tents and etc. for the schools that cannot manage to put up. Indeed, private we cannot manage, very few. But those who have break even, they could, some of them can, but many can't. So there is that provision to cater for all that.
Temporary structures.
Temporary structures, they are allowed, and I think it is okay with that. It is easy to make it.
Indeed.
Then too, is about fees. School fees, I think ideally it is not proper for us to start thinking about increasing fees at this time.
Indeed.
We are seeing what is happening. The whole issue is about how do parents fulfill their obligations, how do they mobilize resources, how do we work out the payment plans with the parents, and how do they help us to mobilize learners back to school, you know, because they have to play a pivotal role in as far as this is concerned. And we seem to agree that to those who have paid fees, they are the paid fees actually. That one, there is no doubt, and we have to accept they paid. But the issue is, can we, if we are to think in natural terms, do you think this fees for the all of this year is still available to cater for your learner at school? And how would you wish to see your child in the school, you know, faring in the midst of no resources? That's why we are saying we need to sit with parents. We discuss how we can, support the students in the schools. In spite of the previous payment, we can have an addition on what we paid on discussion with the parents to supplement what you had given me, which is not available. Two, we can have discussions as a school community. The parents, the first thing before the learners report, we are going to engage the parents to see how we are going to prepare ourselves. So we think the parents, we can sit with them. The school management committee is there. This is a body that makes decision in the school. The board of governors to decide on the fate of the school fees in the schools. If this is approved, you just need to write to the Minister of Education and inform them of the resolutions, and you move forward.
Shall you also be blocking unvaccinated teachers, unvaccinated learners and parents alike as we fully reopen? And what kind of information should the parents, learners and the teachers have at the back of their mind as they actually make that journey to the school setting?
We have been in the campaign of vaccination, and we have been calling upon all proprietors and teachers to mobilize their teachers, and even those teachers who have not been employed but out of the college to continue doing the same. For sure, we are not allowing, and we have already blocked many of them. We are not allowing teachers, non-teaching staff, even suppliers. We are not allowing them in our schools. Suppliers of these supplies we use in the schools, if they are not vaccinated. This is a campaign we should adhere to. And of course, the students, we agreed. Those who have reached the age of 18, we are working out with the parents. We are sending messages. They take them for vaccination. When they report, they come with the cards. And we shall, proofread the cards to ensure that whatever information is given is right information. This is going to help us safeguard the sector and see the sector move back to at least a starting point.
How prepared are the private institutions to inculcate or put in place ICT infrastructure to help with continued learning?
I think this is something we support, but cannot for sure be gained right now. One of the things we have to think about in the medium, we have short term, then we have medium and long term.
Indeed.
This is something that requires long term and medium term intervention. What is this? That is prioritization of education. Prioritization means, please put in money in the education sector. Putting money means improve the human resource. Okay. Two, go digital, okay? Have systems in place. Today as we talk, there are no systems to manage that, even if you want it. That's why I was saying...
Meaning institutions are not ready for this reopening.
They are not ready. We have no instructors. Some of the schools, the majority have no systems in place, and our academic system has been really face off. Okay, the person who is meant to teach is supposed to be physically in the face of the one is educating, and that's the background. We are changing from that traditional kind of system to a new modern normal. Now we are saying this transformation of digitalizing ICT has to take a center stage. After preparation, we are not prepared now. The moment you try it out, you'll see that you are separating, you are creating a dichotomy between, you are creating societies within the schools. Those who are better off and those who are poorer off. In the villages, in the countryside, the majority don't know even what you are talking about. They have even never held a CASA. They have never, all that. So we think it is good, it is a way to go. But we need to get ready for it. We need to start planning for it. We need instructors. We don't have instructors who are teachers. We instead get people from other sectors who have qualified in ICT, and you start giving them the syllabus to follow. So all of that requires preparation.
Indeed.
We need to prepare schools for that. We need to extend the networks. We need to more subsidize on the computers and all of that.
And it couldn't be more spot on with that submission. Hassadu Chidabida, thank you for shining a light on these challenges affecting the private institutions ahead of their reopening. Thank you very much for coming through.
You are welcome, please. And
indeed, that is Hassadu Chidabida, the chairperson for the National Private Education Institutions right here in Uganda. Of course, we do have John Walugembe. I could already see him through the rare glass window of the studio, ready to enter and talk about the SMEs and how they are affected by the Dubai flight ban. We'll be right back.
You're watching Morning